Pete, we obviously talk a lot about anxiety on this podcast. It's in the title.
We have been known to go in that direction, yeah.
Yeah, but for the cold open this week, I wanted to slightly pivot to anxiety's relation to fear itself. And I may have stumbled across something slightly interesting. We'll see. I'm not too sure about this one. Last week, if you remember, we talked about our adorable fear of lakes because we're both ridiculous people. And we both realized that some of our fears might come from horror films and fiction, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, The Raft.
Now, in a horror film, I'm going to quiz you. I'm almost certain you will know the answer to this, as will most of the audience. But in a horror film, there are always scenes where the protagonist is slowly walking through a scary landscape, like a dark hallway or a creepy carnival. And the music is all nervous violins and everything is in shadows. And then, boom! Either a cat jumps out or a jerk with an axe falls from the ceiling to start attacking and whatever. What do people in the horror movie industry call that type of scare?
Well, that Tom, would be a jump scare.
And I just realized I said a cat jumps out. I kind of gave it up in the, well, all right.
You're fine. You're doing fine.
Correct. It is called a jump scare. And I think in just poking around about fear and anxiety like a creep, I think I stumbled across the scientific term for a jump scare.
Really?
Yeah. It's called a fear potentiated startle. And I enjoy, say that once. A fear potentiated startle.
You just made jump scares really lame.
Right? Guess what? It's going to get lamer. In a general fear response, so generally for how fear works is the amygdala is stimulated and either the fight or flight mode is initiated. But how this comes into jump scare, it's that part of potentiated. It's the process of potentiation. Potentiation when your fear response is amplified because you're already in a state of anxiety. So if you're already goosey, again, that's the technical term. If you're already goosey, then you're primed, of course, for a bigger scare. That's the point of the nervous violins and all the shadows.
To prime you.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're watching a documentary about ants, and why would you, any kind of tickle on your neck, like by your sweater or something, will startle you and make you jump out of your seat. If you're afraid of tail strikes, even the slightest turbulence during takeoff, this is really all about me, huh?
Yeah,
we'll push your blood pressure, through the roof.
Yeah.
Is that an interesting thing to know? It's a fear potentiated startle. I don't think, most directors would like to say, and then we'll hit him with a fear potentiated startle. But I kind of like accidentally stumbling on what could be the scientific term for it.
Well, it makes me want to take on more horror movies because now I feel like that's just BS. Like, I can take a fear potentiated startle.
Right.
I can take anything.
Exactly. When you really break it. Yeah. So I guess when you're watching a horror movie with your friends or your loved ones and they jump out of their seat when something scary happens, you can now turn to them and say that is a fear potentiated startle. And then you can look forward to getting a divorce or new friends because you will sound like a jerk.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to What's That Smell? A sometimes funny podcast about humans and their anxieties. I'm Tommy Metz III.
And I'm Pete Wright.
And every week we drag out one of our deepest, darkest anxieties into the light to share it, learn about it,
and hopefully laugh about it with all of you. You should probably let us hear from you. Here's how to do it. Send an email to somethingstinky@rashpixel.fm. And you can let us know about your anxieties and see if any of our anxieties connect with your anxieties, and we'll have a little anxiety party. That'll be great fun.
That party sounds terrible.
And with that, I've got something to tell you about. Tom,
this sounds promising.
I'm a
really exhale right into the mic.
I am a middle-aged white man, Tom.
Hooray.
If I were a milk carton, that carton would be white with black, bold Arial type. And perhaps the type has assorted weights, maybe a fine print, but it would be the most generic milk carton that you could find.
Oh.
Right? Okay. I am heterosexual. I am married to a woman. I have never really considered a broader romantic or sexual relationship with a man. My life in this regard has been remarkable only insofar as it has been remarkably simple, right? And predictable and stereotyped.
Okay.
But now I'm a parent of 2 white kids. And even though they are white kids of my breeding, they exist in a world that is remarkable in how expansive it is. It's not full of white milk cartons with black Arial type. It's full of decorative milk cartons and milks of varieties and whole milks and reduced fat milks and pasteurized milk and juices. There are juices.
Juices.
Of all sorts of fruits and vegetables. And I don't understand it. I don't understand all the juices, and I'm a little bit terrified of them, the juices. And I think, and I should say, we're going to talk about social anxiety again.
Okay.
And we've talked about it a little bit before because of you and your crazy friend, but this is a little bit different because my anxiety around these things, it's not because of I'm scared of what juice represents. It's because I am weirdly, deeply afraid that I am not welcoming them into my life well enough. Do you know?
Okay. And now I can relax because this whole time, just 1% of me was like afraid you'd go, why can't we just go back to white milk? USA. And I'd be like, well, Pete, gotta go. This episode is a watch. Okay. I see what you're saying. Dealing with this brave new world of diversity.
Yeah, I get how you might have gone that route.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
When you were scared of the juices, I was like, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Mark the time code.
It's a funny feeling, right? Because I feel like I'm just not able to communicate that I have a deep desire to learn and to understand and not to offend anyone in my effort to do all this learning and understanding. But wow, does this trigger my social anxiety? So I go into these situations where I am confronted by all of the juices and milks, and I'm just shunted to silence, thinking if I open my mouth, I'm going to embarrass myself or someone I care about, like my family. So I better not open my mouth. And I had this conversation with my daughter over dinner because she has a very diverse social group, and it is wonderful. She has, she's got a couple of trans friends. One of them is dating another one of her other friends, and I have to admit, when I started hearing all of the different words that she was using, I didn't know what many of them meant, describing how they define themselves. And it puts me into this place of real distance because I'm not able to relate because I don't understand the language, and I've never had to. And I think there's a funny thing that goes on right now, that some of the reaction that may be perceived, when we're in the media, we watch this perception of from equal rights groups that we're just not, we're not aware, we're not woke, whatever. There's a perception that we're actively against their efforts. And that is just not my case. My case is...
It's not your case.
Right, exactly. Right. I have never spent any time really being put in a position where I had to think about them. I just haven't. I've been thinking about other things. And now I have to think about, all of these different things. So let's talk about race for a second first, right?
Okay.
I pretty much have this under control, but it was super rocky.
Really?
Because, oh my God, I'm really embarrassed to even talk about it. I guess that's why we do this stupid show.
Right.
I grew up in a very white neighborhood, right? When I went to a very white school, it was just, we were homogeneous. It's just what we were.
Yep.
I didn't have a choice in the matter. It's just what I knew. The first opportunity I had to meet a black guy, I was straight up Bradley Whitford in Get Out.
Oh, no.
Oh. I was super...
Oh, you mean the first part of Bradley Whitford, where he's like overcompensating, not the other part where he sells him to someone.
No, that was not the other part. But you know what? Like that movie, I related to that movie in a big way because I feel like relating to other races, not just black, but black and Asian and Hispanic. Like I feel like there is a whole language I deeply want to learn to be able to relate. And like you were talking about, in a past show, feeling like as soon as conversation stops, you're being judged. For me, that really falls into play, when talking and engaging with people of other races. And I want to be, I want to be accepted. And that is a deep lizard brain feeling.
Yeah.
That I now feel like I'm, as an adult, I feel like I'm in a diverse community, and it has been a great relief to feel release and have some very dear friends who are not
Sure.
middle-aged white people, and feel connected to them.
Well, because what it sounds like you're saying is that you want to be accepted, but you also very much want them to know that you accept them.
Yes. Yes.
That's the best thing about what you're saying is that a lot of people take that type of anxiety or fear and unfortunately dig in and say, I didn't have to think about it before, so why now?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're being trapped in a prison of the exact opposite. It's completely of your own making, and you're so wanting to reach out and be so inclusive that instead you stand in the corner and rock back and forth. I have family members that I have noticed, say if we're like on a trip or something and checking out of a hotel, they will say, thank you, thanks, my man. Can you tell the difference between the three people in that? And it's coming out of love. I mean, obviously they're a little bit older, and so, that's just sort of how they are trying to relate. It's tough.
But, like I said, I've moved past a lot of this stuff.
Sure.
And now it's all about trying to relate to people who are super important to me. And I want them to feel welcoming in my home. I want them to feel welcome, but like I understand them. And yet I know that issues of gender identity versus gender expression are things that I was not raised to internalize, to understand.
Sure.
And that causes me, that is the new version of my existential social anxiety struggle. And it's a tough one. And so I've been looking into this, and it turns out there are so many new words, Tom. There's so many new words.
Okay. I believe it. Yeah.
And so, let's just
you got
say
some examples?
Well, I have some the top examples, and I would say the Human Rights Campaign is so great, and they have a fantastic glossary of terms with 1,000 words. But for me, honest to God, I did not understand the difference between gender identity and gender expression.
Right.
And let alone, adding sexual orientation to that. I mean, is this something that you have internalized? Do you know how all this works? The mechanics?
I do not, but I've been trying my best to learn.
There you go. Well, look at how woke we are.
We are so woke. No, I've been trying to, just because, I work with fifth graders in a number of different schools, and some of these kind of different expressions and identities are starting earlier and earlier. And God love it for that. I mean, I can see how this could seem to older Americans as scary or weird, or they're just looking for attention or anything like that. Of course, because it's new. I'm not saying you're saying that at all. But I know that for a lot of people, this is probably, the country is moving forward very, very fast. Yeah. And as a result, a lot of the country is responding to that by wanting to hit the brakes. And this has happened over and over again throughout American history. It's always 2 steps forward, a big step back when we're dealing with actually identifying and relating and including different people with differences.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's so thrilling for any anxiety that I do feel sometimes about misstepping, saying the wrong thing. It's so amazing that, I mean, for how many years people like this didn't have any voice, didn't have any words, would just be thrown into a pile of freaks that didn't fit in at all, where a lot of people were. I mean, homosexuals were that way for a long time.
Yeah.
And so it's so incredible to have this sort of multifaceted way of taking control of your identity and sort of deciding how you want to do it.
I read a really, what I am categorizing as a hateful bit of commentary on this, and honestly, I can't remember where it was from. But I'm sure it will sound familiar to people out there who have any interest in this stuff, which was, oh my gosh, why are there so many trans kids like in middle school and high school? All of a sudden, it's such a trend. Oh, it's so trendy to be trans. Why are there so many? And the response, which I thought was actually brilliant, was because all of them have fewer of you to be afraid of today. And I think,
sure.
Right? I mean, that hits home in a wonderful new way. So I was never able to really internalize the difference between gender identity and gender expression, right? The internal concept of male and female or a blend. There was no such thing as a blend when I grew up. That's not what I got. and
Right.
that was
Milk.
just it. Right. Yeah, exactly. And gender expression, the external appearance of gender identity, that those things are different. And I feel like I'm just habituating the understanding that those two things can be different and totally normal. That I can walk around the high school corridors with my daughter, and I'm only just now, after several years now of trying to do this kind of internal processing, I can look at and not be surprised, and that feels really good. But I feel like I need to.
Are you talking about the difference between identity and expression?
Yeah, right.
In part of that, what would you mind explaining it to the audience? What you have figured out? I mean, we shouldn't assume that everyone that's listening, there's probably a lot of people that are like you, and understandably so, and
I
were
hope
like
that-
me
yeah.
until very recently.
Yes.
Very recently.
I hope so.
In no way
yeah.
am I standing on any kind of a post being like, "Oh, Pete,
Well, you're
it's all love." Like I'm figuring it out too.
No. You're a little holier than thou. Let's just be straight. You're better than me.
I don't mean to
That's
be.
okay. We can
mean
move
to
through it. I will be your pupil.
But please,
Well,
What have
okay. So the big term sexual orientation is what we grew up with, right? Those are the words we grew up with, and that is the emotional, romantic, or sexual attraction to other people. And there was heterosexual and there was homosexual, and that's where the discussion ended. And in our time growing up as kids, we grew up through a lot of dissent around homosexuality. I happen to be raised in a family that was, progressive about these things, but we certainly never talked about it.
Sure.
It was just, it was there. But this, right now we have gender identity, which is the internal concept of self, right? As male, female, or a blend. This was the key learning. And again, this is in the Human Rights Campaign's website, that gender identity can be the same or different from their sex, which was assigned at birth. Identity is different than sex. And that is a really important thing that I think people in my cohort, people who also struggle with this sort of social anxiety, don't get.
if you don't have that, it's hard to wrap your head around it. It's
Yeah.
hard to. You can definitely sympathize. It's hard to empathize with something like that.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, wait, was that the gross way to? That was the right way to say that, right?
I-
See, now I'm having the anxiety.
right? See
Now I'm
how
having
easy
the
it is?
exact
You're in the
anxiety that you
hole.
just said.
Yeah.
It's hard to put yourself, it's hard for me personally to put myself in that person's shoes and
Yeah.
say, I was born blank, instead I identify as the opposite or a fluid in between that.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm so glad because, I mean, how serious and how schizophrenic must that make you feel if you don't have a voice or anyone around that understands that that's how you feel?
Well, and that gets to gender expression, which is the external appearance of gender identity. So you have this internal concept of how you believe yourself to be, male, female, or blend, and how you express it externally through behavior and clothing and haircut and voice and all of those sort of external markers. That is wrapped up as gender expression, right? And that's a different thing than identity.
Right.
That was and has been and continues to be complicated for me to wrap my head around.
Let me go ahead and advertise my ignorance. Would there be a reason for someone to, let's say, be born male, self-identify as a female, but then dress expression-wise as a male?
Well, now, of course, I'm going to need you to say that again. Okay.
It's sort of, it's like an ABA. You're born male, but you self-identify inside as a female. But then for whichever reason, you choose to express your outward dress as a male.
Yeah. Born male, identify female, express male.
Dress male.
Well, isn't that technically closeted in some way, shape, or form? Isn't that what we're talking
It
about?
was, but it doesn't have to be anymore.
It doesn't have
I
to be.
guess.
And that is where we get to transgender, right? Where
Okay.
and that is apparently a much larger term than I ever thought it to be. It is, again, according to HRC, an umbrella term for people whose gender identity and or expression is different from cultural expectations based on the sex they were assigned at birth. So it doesn't matter how you express. If it's different from what you were assigned at birth, you're trans. and this is the other thing that I think is important. Trans is not connected to sexual orientation. That trans people can be gay, straight, lesbian, bisexual, whatever.
Right.
That what we're talking about here is how they identify in their own skin and where they're most comfortable in their own skin. And that also could be different. Just because, you're a male expressing as female, you could be lesbian. Is what we're saying. And that is all about what you feel most comfortable and safe. And so clearly I'm saying this as if I know a lot about it. I really don't. I really don't. And I just, it has been illuminating to try to keep up with conversations with my daughter who knows already so much more than I do. And just because of her social group and the fact that they finally in their school feel safe and open enough to be who they are. And so I'm proud of her. I'm honestly a little bit proud of me.
I'm proud of your anxiety.
I'm super anxious about it. Yeah.
But I'm proud of that because it's not anxious of the world is moving too fast and everyone stop and just go back to being boys and girls and milk. That's not your anxiety at all. It's right to have anxiety if your anxiety is based in not wanting to hurt or accidentally demean someone or make them feel less included or anything. That's a good problem to have.
Well, okay.
I'm not saying it's not a problem, but that's a really good problem to have.
I'll be your hero today. Maybe not tomorrow, but today I'll be your hero. Look, I have to add this is like a little bonus tag to this conversation because, and I should say, I took this blues pilgrimage to the Delta Blues Triangle, the Mississippi Delta, and we traveled around there. And I took a lot of photos. It was a wonderful trip. But let me tell you, never have I felt more like a middle-aged white guy than there. And that was a transformative experience for me, being put in a position where I was the absolute economic, racial, I was the minority in every way you could possibly say it. And I've never felt more welcomed into a community than these little tiny, former plantations that welcomed us and fed us and treated us so, so well from the seat of, in many cases, deep poverty. It is humbling and shaming to even have this conversation here on this beautiful computer and screen and microphone.
Right.
So to say it's anything less than transformative is that. But here's an interesting thing. I ran across a cross-ethnic comparison of lifetime prevalence of rates of anxiety disorders. Do you know what that means?
Oh.
Yeah, it's a paper.
That was a lot of words.
Yeah, I read a journal article. Like a real smart guy. Yeah, I did. And I just have one thing to say. This is an article, a wonderful study where they interviewed thousands and thousands of people. And it turns out this social anxiety that I experience, it's because I'm white. And in fact, Black people and Hispanics and Asians, especially, if you want to not have social anxiety, you want to be Asian compared to white people. This study points out that white people, with the exception of PTSD, lead the charge for social anxiety. And yes. Yeah. And so, but the only thing, the only area specific anxiety related to connected to race where African Americans beat white people is PTSD. So, and that is also a shame.
Let's not say African Americans beat white people. Let's just have it again. Come on. Now is the time to be as delicate with language as we possibly can. You know what? It's their turn.
I can't win this. You just exemplified exactly my problem, Tom. I can't win. So, African Americans have more PTSD than white Americans. I'm really sorry about that because then it gets into such huge questions about, socioeconomic availability of care in areas where that are underserved, and that's a lot of what some of this article deals with. This journal article. So many thanks to authors. There are so many authors, but I'm really glad that they did this.
I actually have a story kind of like yours, a little bit. Well, not like yours, but you were talking about your blues trip that my parents and I a couple of years ago we have family in Florida and we went on a trip to an actual ex-slavery plantation. that is now just opened for history, and they have guides that'll take you around, show you where everybody lived and all the work that they did. And it was my family, which are all white, and then an African-American family. To mother, father, kid on both sides. Yeah. And throughout we learned that really what we needed to do was all just have a really big hug at the start of it, because the entire tour, every time the docent would make any kind of a joke, we'd go, huh? And then we'd sort of stare at each other. Like, I'd look at them, they'd look at us. Every time there was a door to go through, it was a no, after you off. Like, I'm surprised we ever got through a door. It's like, please, after you. No, it's fine after you. They were so obviously trying to say, we know it's not you. Not all white people are the worst. And while we're desperately trying to say, we're sorry, we're white, we're not the worst, without talking. And it was the most polite hour I've ever spent with people trying to outdo themselves to be so polite and so nice that I wondered how we ever got out of there. But it ended up being a great experience. But that definitely is a part of that anxiety but on the side of not you're different than me, but just because of our differences, I desperately want you to know that is not important to me.
Well, and the social anxiety is just because of our differences. I desperately want to understand, and right. Communicate this more. And the anxiety is I may get weird about it.
Right. Exactly. Where'd the white people live? Yeah, like that, like dumb things you can say on a plantation. Like, right. Tell me more about tea, and they'd be like, okay.
The worst.
Pete, have you heard of the sad story of Robert Williams?
No. Should I have?
Probably not. It's kind of a footnote in history, but there is something kind of important about it that relates to my anxiety this week.
Oh, outstanding.
Robert Williams was born on May 2nd, 1953, and for most of his young adult life, he worked at the Ford Motor Company factory in Flat Rock, Michigan. And on January 25th, 1979, I guess that would make him just about 26 years old, Williams was overseeing a robot that was designed to move material from one part of the factory to the other. And Mr. Williams noticed that the robot was running very slowly, and so, unfortunately, he climbed into the storage rack to retrieve parts manually. It was there that he was struck in the head by the arm of the 1-ton production line robot and was killed instantly.
This is your fear of technology, isn't it?
He would go down in history as the first recorded human killed by a robot.
There we go.
Yes. I'm separating it from technology.
It's
because
robots.
That is a separate one. Robophobia is an anxiety disorder in which the sufferer has an irrational fear of robots, drones, robot-like mechanics, or artificial intelligence. Real quick, after Mr. Williams died, just 2 years later, a Japanese engineer named Kenji Urata was at a Kawasaki Heavy Industries plant. He was working on a broken robot, and when he failed to turn it off completely, it pushed him into a grinding machine with its arm. Gross.
Now see... Okay.
Now see,
Listen to me. How quickly I come to the defense of robots.
Well, here's the thing is one might assume that when I bring up robots that I'm scared of them. What do you usually get worried about?
Yeah, right. I mean, there's the uprising, right? Like that robots are going to rise up and
right. Gaining sentience.
Yeah, right. iRobot kind of stuff.
What's slightly interesting about me is I am less interesting than that because I don't even need them to gain sentience to have robots give me
exist.
a little bit because I don't need them to become the Terminator. I'm not yet worried about robots gaining sentience. It's more about the fact that you can't reason with a robot who has been programmed to do a mission.
Right.
It has no eyes you can see compassion in. There's no reasoning with it. It's been programmed with a mission, something to do, and either through a very human user error or just a glitch, it will complete its mission with no ability of empathy, sympathy, or the ability to, read any gray areas involved with human emotion and judgment.
Yeah,
something about that is really deeply unsettling to me.
Yes.
You're much more of a technophile than I am, so you probably might not have this kind of, you see robots as good in the future.
Yeah, but let's, I'll tell you where, okay, do you have more? Because I have stuff on this. I really do. I've got material.
Sure. Well, what do you? I mean, let's just go ahead and talk about it. What do you got?
Do you know about the trolley problem?
Ooh, I do know about the trolley problem. Yes, but I never thought of that as a robot issue, but I guess it is. Okay, go ahead. What's the trolley problem?
So the trolley problem, you have this trolley on the tracks, and you are in charge of the switch, right? You're in charge of the switch between two tracks. We're at a switch where the train could go one direction or it could go the other direction, and you're in charge of making that decision. Now, you have one person tied up on one side of the track. So if the train goes in that direction, it will kill absolutely that one person. So if you pull the switch, you'll kill the person. If you don't pull the switch, it will kill 5 people that are on the main track.
Why are all these people on track?
I wonder about that, but we're not gonna get hung up on that right now. No, there are people who are gonna die, and you get to choose through inaction or action how many are going to die by this. So this is an ethics problem, and it has come up in robotics, particularly in AI. And that is where my concern is. That's how I'm sort of connecting to your anxiety here.
Okay.
When you have these manufacturers who are making self-driving cars who have to be able to consider the trolley problem, essentially, right? They have to be able to say, okay, I see one person if I swerve left, or I could careen into that shopping mall if I swerve right to save the passenger who's in the car, right? Whose life is more valuable? The person who paid the ticket to buy the car? Does Mercedes get to make a self-driving car that will protect its owner at all rights and kill people indiscriminately to do that? Those kinds of questions are super huge. And they scare the crap out of me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that you think that you buy a ticket to buy a car. That's also interesting. I guess you've never really bought a car yourself. It's not really like a raffle, but I get it. I get what you're saying.
So I think about that a lot. And it really does scare me because it actually has, it plays out in information dynamics too, right? Because, we're seeing more and more computers making decisions about the kinds of news that gets broadcast, right? You have these applications that are creating news videos of clips from social media and repurposing them, and without human intervention. At what point do these computers make choices that are actually damaging to humanity? And
it doesn't have to be an uprising.
Yeah.
It can just be, this is what the algorithm means. We've seen, what I also wanted to get into is a lot of this involves the military. And I'm so back and forth about it with our use of drones. And every once in a while on YouTube, there'll be some nightmare robot dog. And I'm like, ugh, I don't care for it.
The ones that you can push them and they get back or they don't fall over. They'll do flips and stuff.
Then when they don't push, I always feel bad for the robot there, weirdly. Anyways, that armed forces robots doing the job of our armed forces seems like a great idea because it would keep actual human lives out of harm's way. But the hubris to think that we are able to, again, this has nothing to do with sentience, just glitches. Just the idea that sending a robot army into a place in order to try to take something down or contain something is terrifying to me. Because we've already seen somewhat recently, with the Stuxnet worm in Iran, which, no one has really copped to, but where the United States and Israel created this sort of virus in order to take down a nuclear plant in Iran, and it's immediately went out of control. And it's affected so much of the world's computers.
Right.
Because we can't control it. We can't really think that we know what we're doing, which is the basis of almost every sci-fi and horror movie, is we think we know what we're doing, and it's always for a good cause. But then when we take the control out from ourselves and give it to a robot, there's something really scary about that. You can't, as I said before, you can't reason with a robot or explain how a mistake has been made. I fear what drones are already doing to us. I guess a lot of this goes with the military, how easier it must be to lob missiles from the sky when there's no human life on our side involved. That's scary. That just makes the things that get a little bit more like a video game, that take you away from seeing another person on the ground. Of course, I want to save all of our soldiers' lives, but there becomes something very chilling and very impersonal about that.
I wonder, that's an interesting, I've always found that to be a really interesting ethical question, right? That we are doing the right thing for the human lives at stake in war. by removing them from. I mean, I think you can make a very strong case for that, and I think you can make an equally strong case that there is greater incentive for peace when human lives are actually at stake in war. And
yes,
and that is a thing that has always bothered me about our new mechanical warfare.
If you're not with the enemy, it's so easy to just demonize them.
Yeah.
They become faceless.
Right.
Yeah. And robots will definitely help us do that. We'll be pressing a button and hoping nothing glitches. Do you know what happened on March 8th of this year?
No.
Yeah. Walmart applied for a patent for drone pollinators, robot bees. This was in a Black Mirror episode, Pete.
Oh my God.
That they would fill in because, bee populations are shrinking rapidly. We know that. And it's probably because of pesticides. We're not exactly sure why, but it's a really big problem. I don't know if the solution is Walmart making robot bees. Because Walmart is who I want to be in charge of robots. Israel and the United States military complex could not handle one little computer worm they put out. But absolutely, Walmart, bee it up. That sounds terrible.
Abandon hope, all ye who enter here, Tommy.
Pretty much. Now I'm really starting to think that my dog might be a robot. I'm kind of getting into that idea.
Okay, so last question. Do you have any fear about the potential? I am truly divided on this subject in my mind. Do you have any fear of the potential and clear path to economic disruption that in the short to medium term that we're seeing with robotics?
Oh, I totally have so many thoughts about it. Why don't you start?
Well,
I got scared by that question.
It starts with jobs, right? I mean, that is honestly one of the things.
Automation.
I think people are, robots lead to automation, lead to dissociating humans from jobs, not just military, but it wreaks economic havoc. As smart as these, robots and technologies are, what is that? Is there a sense of, again, existential fear about what it could do to our economy? Because I think that's also a big deal.
Very much so. And I don't know if the people that are in power that are pushing for these things, they're probably not listening to people that know what it will. I mean, self-driving cars sounds great, or self-driving trucks like we saw in Logan, delivery trucks. If you make all the trucks that are delivering self-driving, entire towns will crumble because they're based in truckers stopping there. You will lose so many small businesses. You will change gas stations. I mean, so many more people. It's not just like the truckers are going to lose their jobs. So many other people are going to be. And I don't know if people really walk that through. As if we do this, great. Instead, I just always think about it when I guiltily use the self-checkout at my grocery store. I'm like, I'm sorry. But you got to work it out. But I don't know. I mean, down that path leads to, a lot of, again, to use the same word, chilling ramifications that can happen.
Yeah, I tend to be more of an optimist on that stuff, and in just sort of the ability to, retrain, and that jobs will change in these small towns. They'll need more people with, who can be engineers and people who can, help support the autonomous technology that comes through these towns. I don't know what that looks like, but I tend to be more of an optimist in those areas. But I clearly don't. I'm so distant from practical application of that stuff. What was that Minority Report future of just calling the car to your house when you need it, and your wall opens up and suddenly you're in it.
What? That was not in the Minority Report.
Minority Report. What was that movie? What was that movie where they? Oh, why can't I think of it now? Where he's on these ramps in the road. He goes up and there's a window that opens up and he steps out of his little pod car and he's in this car. That's what I want. The pod car that just comes to my house and I can step in it when I need to go someplace, and then I get out.
Yeah. Well, this new screenplay you're working on sounds dynamite. Because I don't think that's sort of an amalgamation of a bunch of movies, but yeah.
I'm going to find it. I'm going to find it, and you're going to feel real bad about this conversation.
Okay. I'm just glad that we'll always have coal.
Stick around for a glimpse into next week's show, but first...
Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Guys, you should go to Audible right now and get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/scent-of-a-podcast. There are over 180,000 titles to choose from your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
Now, all right, I've been looking through my Audible library, and I have been looking for something deep and heartfelt and sensitive to recommend based on the things we have talked about today, and I certainly have one for mine. I am very excited to recommend Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, a series of essays and stories that he writes to his adolescent son about how to handle living in a racial America. And it is an amazing set of essays and stories, and read by the author just makes it that much more special. So I highly recommend Between the World and Me. And I have a bonus recommendation, Tom. What?
Oh, hold on, though. I'm excited about the first one because I had never heard of that book, and I'm absolutely going to check it out on Audible. So thank you very much for recommending that.
Oh, yeah.
And you have a bonus?
I have a bonus, and it's for you, Tom. It's for you.
What?
I need you to learn the 3 laws of robotics, Tom. You're going to do it with Isaac Asimov's I, Robot, narrated by, I think, the single best male narrator in Audible. His name is Scott Brick. Scott Brick. If there's anybody that I wish were my audio uncle, it would be Scott Brick. I love him, man. He reads all the best books. And so you should go listen to I, Robot. It is a classic of robotic uprisings. You should definitely read it. Don't see the Will Smith movie. Do yourself a favor. Read the book. Don't be a savage. Learn the rules of robotics. They're all in there.
I did not murder him, right? Is that the same movie that you told everyone not to watch?
Don't see that movie, Tom.
I will read the book instead. For you, no, I won't. I'll listen to it. For you, the listeners of What's That Smell? Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. Again, visit www.audibletrial.com/scent-of-a-podcast. Today's tune is Rock This Joint by Yanivi.
We don't pay to advertise this show, everybody, so we appreciate you sharing it with others you think would be interested. If you don't want Audible, that's fine. You don't have to support the show through Audible. But because we're a new show, those 5-star reviews in iTunes and Apple Podcasts really help others to discover the show. So if you like what you've heard, please share the love with a review and a comment, or share it on Facebook. Let people know that we're out there. We could really use your help.
Thank you, guys. We really appreciate it. And now, coming up next week, but Pete, Lady Love Cool James. You gotta get your LL Cool J in there.
Italians, as a rule, are a good-looking people.
Sure. What? You're not a doctor?
But
oh my God! This whole thing is a lie. Okay.
Gluten.
Ah! What? Gluten!
Because
Gluten! Until then, I'm Tommy Metz III.
I'm Pete Wright. Thanks for downloading. We'll be back next week on What's That Smell?
Join on the corner where the big boys play.
I mean, there were self-driving cars very much in Minority Report. He had to jump out of one. It got repurposed and was taking him to the police station. So he had to jump out of it. So he lost control of his own car. But it didn't pull up. There was never a scene where it pulled up to his house and he just sort of got in. So I'm trying to think of what you were thinking of.
Wait a minute. It was Minority. It's totally Minority Report. I'm looking at it on YouTube. The car wheels up to his... You jerk. Suck it.
Wait, but you said it goes into his house.
You just watch this clip. This is exactly what I imagined.
Oh, no, I blew it.
Well, that's not Minority Report. And there were no ants in Old Boy.
Oh, I totally don't remember this scene.